You know, it's funny, I always decide what I'm going to talk about probably 5 minutes before I do the presentation. I mean, the slides are kind of the same, but, you know, kind of understanding the audience a bit better and also seeing what the speakers were talking about. So I'm the guy who doesn't lie, and that's been a problem in my career. People ask me opinions and, you know, things like that, and I give them, you know, real raw feedback, whether it's in my columns or things like that, or even doing radio and television. And the reality is that when you look at some of the strides that we made in terms of security, that there's different patterns of enterprises out there that are leveraging this stuff. We saw a lot of the logos in the previous presentation, and I think that we're seeing the newer upstarts who are moving into cloud-based systems, and that's easy to secure because we're building the thing from the ground up to be secure. Then we're seeing ISVs, and we have a lot of those folks as our clients, where they were installing things with DVDs or perhaps mag tape, and now they're basically moving into the cloud computing world. But the majority of the people that are really having issues with getting security correct in cloud computing are the traditional enterprises. So you know them, the multi-billion, multi-trillion dollar companies, the Global 2000 companies, as they move into cloud-based systems, are really stubbing their toe at getting security basically in the enterprise on premises to match what's in the cloud. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today about. So breaking barriers. So technology is not the biggest blocker to cloud security anymore. So something happened about 3 years ago. The cloud became, and this is probably attributable more to AWS than anybody else, the cloud became more secure, typically has the potential to be more secure than we can make the on-premises systems. And the reason I can prove that is because the hacks that have made the Today Show or Sky TV in the UK, things like that, are related to on-premise systems being hacked. And the reality is that the attack surfaces, the ability to kind of get into those systems is way easier than getting into an AWS tenant, especially if someone's properly set up their security parameters, things like that. So what's occurred is that we're in an environment now where the public cloud-based systems, the applications we're building in the public cloud, are typically going to be more secure than what's existing within the enterprises. And you have guys like me who are in the enterprises these days hiring me as a consultant, and they're asking me to figure out some sort of a strategy so they can find some synergy, protect their existing systems, in essence, make their systems that exist in their enterprise data centers, which I don't like, match up with their capabilities of the cloud-based system. So it's kind of a topsy-turvy world. When you think about it, 3-4 years ago, I was having argument after argument with people about security and the cloud, and the reason we won't move to the cloud, it can't be held, it's not protected, the encryption services, the compliance systems there aren't necessarily where we need to be. And now it's not the case. And so now we have kind of conversations that are, kind of wigged out, where we're talking to people about becoming better at security, and holistically within their enterprises, it makes it happen. So, truth is that, competent cloud security technology is available in most IT organizations. Cloud teams are good finding using it, but cloud IT doesn't exist in a vacuum. So having the right approach to making this stuff work becomes a key priority. So the reality is I can't protect my system holistically, my applications holistically, using tactical tools. So if I just encrypt certain data, not certain data, put firewalls for certain kinds of penetration, and not put up others. And the ability to kind of get these things correct and get these things holistically within the enterprises means I have to take traditional IT, which typically isn't talking to the cloud guys. They like each other, but they're a little suspicious about each other. And get them working together so we can get the capabilities and the patterns of the technology that we're leveraging for security inside the enterprise to match the stuff we're building in the public cloud. And so that's really kind of the focus of what we're trying to do today. Now, the reality is I think that people typically think of security as bolt-on stuff. So when they build applications, security is kind of step 12 getting the security stuff underway, adding encryption capabilities, logon systems, things like that. With the advent of things like identity-based management, network-based security, encryption-based security, infrastructure-based security, it has to be holistic and basically sit above the existing applications of data that sits within the enterprise. It can't be built into each application in each database. So thinking differently about how this stuff is going to work and the amount of technology you need to make it work, both on-premise and the cloud, is something that enterprises are wrestling with today. So the departments within IT need to start talking. Within the Global 2000 companies, if you guys work for them, I'm sure some of you guys do today, they're incredibly politically charged in these organizations. People have little fiefdoms. They have the security folks, they have the cloud folks, they have the DevOps folks, they have all these sorts of folks who exist within these particular silos. We can see some of them up there. But they're not necessarily communicating one to another, and that's causing the rift. And so me as a consultant, if I go into an organization and try to make them communicate, it's almost impossible to do. You have to basically recruit someone who's empowered to make key decisions, and they have to be empowered. Their superpowers are the ability to fire people and control their budgets. And if they can do that, they can actually make changes occur and get these folks working together. Other than that, it's a very difficult thing to start moving these people in these directions. However, we've had some success, and I'll tell you about that, and we've had some challenges that we're trying to get through right now. So joining forces. Many instances, the groups that build and deploy clouds are decoupled from traditional IT. How would the effective cloud security? Most traditional systems need to be included in the design and deployment. So you can't build systems in vacuums. So even if you're building net new in the cloud or you're migrating existing application workloads into the cloud, they have to have synergy with how you're going to do DevOps, how you're going to do security, how you're going to do all these various services that have to exist both on-premise and in the cloud. So as we're changing the way in which we do development, we do hosting, we do security, we do governance, monitoring, management, things like that, we have to have some way to loop in the existing on-premise stuff, which, by the way, is always going to be around in a certain degree, not to the degree it is today. But as we make the migrations, there's some systems that are economically just incapable of moving. We just don't need to move. But how are we going to make those things secure and have these cloud-based innovations work and play well with the existing stuff, traditional enterprise stuff that sits within the data centers? So the weakest security link is typically going to define your security. So if your cloud-based systems are very secure and you're replicating data, down to your on-premise systems, and there's some sort of a weakness or vulnerability that's in those systems, you're going to make your cloud-based system, your data that exists in the cloud, just as unsecure. So it's the backdoor kind of thing is left open, and you're able to kind of expose existing vulnerabilities, not based on the fact that they're innate and native in the cloud, but based on the fact I'm getting into other systems which are able to get me into my cloud-based system or cloud-based data that may be stored on-premise. So trying to get organizations aligned with that message is where the difficulty comes in. So the weakest link, the encryption systems, the operating system vulnerabilities aren't updated. They're not dealing with the updates to the firewalls. They're installing systems that are causing vulnerabilities, not installing patches and fixes as on-premise. Then they're going to be vulnerable. And that's why you see the Home Depots and the Sonys and things like that. The hacks occur on the on-premise systems, not necessarily the systems in the cloud, because that's where they occur. So if I can get into those systems, in many instances, I get into based infrastructure, and I have vulnerabilities. All the systems that are basically connected to that thing become vulnerable if they're sharing information with other systems. So we have a problem now, and it's a weird problem, because 8 years ago, I don't think people would thought we'd had this problem, where security, in terms of best practices and enabling technology, is set by the public cloud providers like AWS, and then trying to replicate those systems into the enterprise is where the difficulty comes in. And how do you base common directory services, common encryption services, things like that. So my answer to that is probably what you're thinking. You have to have a holistic approach to how you're going to do cloud-based security and how you're going to do on-premise-based security. You can't really separate one from the other. You can't hack off cloud. You can't hack off on-premise, traditional systems, legacy systems, mainframe-based systems. There has to be an overreaching set of a minimum security kinds of systems, whether it's identity-based management, encrypt everything, network-based security, all of the above, that really provides holistic protection within your on-premise systems or systems that exist in the cloud. This year is kind of a banner year because we're going to move from about 10% workloads that have moved into an infrastructure as a service cloud, typically it's going to be AWS, to about 20% by the end of this year. It's almost doubling the amount of workloads. And so we're seeing that kind of acceleration occur within the enterprises these days. But as we make the move, the same time implementing security, implementing DevOps, trying to get this stuff working the way it should be. So on-premise systems, not cloud workloads, have been the favorite targets of hackers for the last several years, and this will continue to be the case. We will see breach after breach after breach this year. Just because I'm going from system to system and looking at the security-based systems, physical premise-based security, many enterprises, not good. Systems haven't been updated in years. Firewalls haven't been updated in years. They're allowing all kinds of IoT-based devices on their Wi-Fi-based systems, which is always a core point of vulnerability I think people are going to exploit. And this is going to be a bad year for that. And a common pattern will be, and you'll hear this first, is that on-premise typically is where the attacks are going to occur. Of course, people will say, well, that's where the data is and continues to be. But as we move more systems to the cloud, we won't see attacks that occur in the cloud. So, interesting. So why? Well, migrating to the cloud provides an opportunity to improve security and bring more resources from the cloud to providing more so organizations can muster themselves. So if we're going to fix a security issue, then cloud provides a clear benefit of doing that. If we start moving into an infrastructure as a service cloud, not only do we get a better and more economical platform to run our base systems, but it's kind of another reason based on the security advantages you get in there. So security-based services, which are economical into themselves, I would view them as free pretty much. We're able to turn on, and we can do identity-based management, directory replication, things like that, encryption on demand, everything you just saw in the previous presentation. All those kinds of services are in there. You're able to turn on fairly easy, fairly quickly. So there's no excuse for not building these base systems in the cloud. So good news is as we move these things off the on-premise system, security is going to be enhanced because the security services are going to be more pervasive and cost-effective that exist in the cloud. The bad news is, as I keep saying over and over again, is that we have to figure out solutions for the stuff we left behind. So security, something I said. So security is becoming a cloud problem. And it's not because cloud computing is endorsing more security risks, but because IT systems that the cloud systems are connected to are so poorly secured. So the only fix for this is to spend money and time and actually figure out a way in which you're going to get the right enabling technology and the right people. You heard some great advice I don't disagree with. It's getting the developers on board and getting the security team on board, the expertise on board that know what they do. And the reality is that if that doesn't occur, then it's going to be pandemonium for a while, where we're going to basically separate the systems, and the stuff that exists on premise that's left behind isn't going to get the attention it needs, the enabling technology it needs. The hackers out there are getting very skilled at getting into those systems. The vulnerabilities are typically well known, and we're going to lose data, which gives PR nightmare, all that stuff. Stock goes down. So don't let culture be a barrier to cloud security. Ultimately, traditional IT and cloud enablers don't work together. This is all for naught. So as we start, setting this stuff up, synergy within the development environments, synergy within IT with the cloud-based newbies who are there, either retrained or hired or consultants. We typically exist in that crowd. The DevOps folks, ability to do continuous integration testing and also continuous, security-based testing as well. And traditional IT from the operators who, kick the systems around the mainframes and work in the enterprise data centers, to the traditional developers, things like that, all have to kind of come together in the same cloud. And you would say, well, they are. They all work for the CIO. CIO doesn't seem to spark the kind of confidence that I would look for them to spark. They're okay with having the silos that exist in the organization, all these folks reporting them to do the basic blocking and tackling and running IT. My advice to them is to get a ad hoc team together to kind of look at where the vulnerabilities are, put together a strategy for how they're going to be patched and fixed, and then start getting the holistic security stuff, which is going to take typically 3 to 5 years to roll out within the organization and cost as much as $100 million. It doesn't have to cost that much. So it's getting these folks on the ball. And to me, I understand it's expensive, but there is no choice, because if you don't do it, then your data is going to get breached over and over again. You're going to have these PR nightmares. Your stock's going to go down. It's going to cost you way more with these sorts of attacks that take place with the bad PR. Lack of confidence, and also just kind of damage of the business. And if you're willing to do that, take that as a risk, by all means go ahead. I wouldn't recommend you do it. But for most organizations, they need to go ahead and take the steps. So I always get this kind of feedback. So I'm telling you, you're telling me, Dave, that we need to move to cloud? Yes. Need to move to cloud as quickly as we can? Yes, absolutely. My current systems on-premise are insecure? Yes. And I need to basically update my security for the on-premise system so holistically it looks the same strategically as my cloud-based security stuff. Absolutely. And so that's a little much for these organizations. Already moving to cloud, already moving to DevOps, updating security-based systems. Now I'm telling them to have to rework their traditional systems. And the ones that are going to move to cloud or not move to cloud. So it's an additional expense in making it happen. But for me, it's one of these things we can't have a choice. We don't have a choice. So that's it. You guys have a good break. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David.